This is my Lotus Europa, and honestly, it's kind of a disaster. Even aside from the fact that I'm going on 3 years into a 3-month project, this thing is way more than I bargained for. Now, the original idea was to take technology from the best race cars of the time and put it into a car that anyone can use. Instead, we got an 82 horsepower death trap that has features rivaling my lawnmower. Now let me tell you why I love it anyway. My story with this car started a few years ago. I was poking around for a project car and I came across something a little different. A 1969 Lotus Europa that hadn't been registered since 1978. Now, I was fascinated, but even I'm not dumb enough to buy an old Lotus that had been sitting for 40 years. Just kidding, I totally am. That's the car from the listing. So why this car? I've already established the Europa is not really that fast, and while the styling is unique, I don't know that I'd go so far as to call it pretty. But I don't care about that. The Europa is absolutely fascinating. It started life as a proposal for the Ford GT40 program, the car that beat Ferrari at Le Mans. Now, I've heard a few explanations for why Lotus didn't get the bid. The first is that a competitor, an automaker named Lola, already had a functioning prototype. Lotus only had a sketch. Ford might have also had some concerns that Lotus, who were known for building ultralight race cars, might struggle to build something robust enough to finish a 24-hour race. But my favorite explanation by far is that Henry Ford II was jealous because the car in the sketch said Lotus on the back. Henry Ford II is notoriously one of the most egotistical guys in the auto industry. The only reason the GT40 exists at all is that he had a personal grudge against Enzo Ferrari. Whatever the reason, Lotus found themselves with a design for a mid-engine race car just kinda lying around. And so Lotus's founder, Colin Chapman, decided to take their design for the most intense racing series in the world and turn it into a street car anyone can buy. Colin Chapman, you're my hero. Anyway, he ditched the Ford V8 and instead they went with a lighter and cheaper engine out of a Renault. But they kept the mid-engine layout, and for the body, they used the same construction as the Elan, a fiberglass body on a steel backbone. Now, the Europa was only the third mid-engine car you could actually buy. The second one, the Lamborghini Miura, costs about $1 million today. If you've got the money, buy the Miura. I'm sure it's worth it. For the rest of us, you can get a decent Europa for 15, 20 grand. And I think that's really what makes the Europa special. They took technology that was normally reserved for race cars and supercars, and they put it into something most people can actually afford. Unfortunately, this bet didn't really pay off for them. They only ever sold 9,000 Europas over a 9-year run, and by the end, it was pretty clear there wasn't a market for this sort of ultralight race car for the street. So in the 70s, Lotus switched gears a little bit. Cars like the Esprit were more comfortable and more stylish, but they were also heavier and slower. And by the 80s, Lotus had switched gears again. Chapman was mostly focusing on developing chassis for other car makers. One of the last projects he worked on was redesigning the DeLorean chassis for production. By the time Chapman died, he was still developing new racing technology, you just didn't see it make its way into the street cars as much. So the Europa is really the last race car for the street that Chapman ever built. But what's it like actually owning one? Well, as it turns out, there's actually some pretty good reasons not to drive a race car on the street. For starters, safety. This is the rear window. It's absolutely tiny because it has to be. The engine's back there. On top of that, this car is about 20% shorter than an NA Miata. This keeps the center of gravity low, which reduces roll and improves handling. It also means that SUVs and pickup trucks have a really hard time seeing you at stoplights. And as for that fiberglass body, designed to shave tons and tons of weight, that's not going to protect you in a crash. Your overall safety profile here, I'd say you're a motorcycle, but you can't lane split to get out of the way. The other thing you got to realize is that a lot of Europas have sat for a long time before people came back and fixed them up. Mine sat since 1978, so I've gone through pretty much every system on the car. And in that time, I have found some truly race car style decision making. This is the gas pedal. Now, it's hard to imagine it being any smaller or lighter than it is, but that's not the problem. The problem is it's so close to the brake pedal that I can't wear my normal shoes when I drive it. If I do, when I push the gas, I also catch the brake. To save weight, the front suspension links are pretty sparse. My front links were all bent when I bought the car. But the most Lotus decision making by far has got to be the axles. They double up as suspension links, which actually is really clever. It completely eliminates another component and, of course, saves weight. Now, because they double as suspension links, you actually have to shim them to compress the seals on the transmission. Those seals were leaking when I bought my car, so I replaced them and reshimmed them, and they still leak. Now, driving and maintaining this car has its issues, but the driving experience is actually really special. To get in, I actually have to sit down first and then pivot my legs over. And then once I'm inside, I'm basically lying down. The Europa has a fixed back seat that can be moved forward and back, but you can't change the angle. Race car. Because of that, as trashed as my interior is, every time I get in this car, it feels like a special experience. Now, you might think that because this car only has 82 horsepower, it would feel pretty underpowered. But because of the 1,500-pound weight, you honestly don't notice it that much. Now, you do notice the awful shifting. The Renault that they pulled this transaxle out of is not a sports car. Shifts are really, really slow. But the bigger issue is that the linkage in this car likes to wear down. And when it does, finding gear is like looking for a SpaghettiO in a bowl of pudding. Good luck. As for the handling, I actually don't know yet. I've only driven this car a couple times because the last time I drove it, I realized that the shocks were seized. Maybe that's what bent my suspension links. Now, I've rebuilt everything, but when I put it back together, I noticed that the new shocks are actually interfering with those front suspension links a little bit. So I got to figure that out and a handful of other things before I can really drive this thing. Now, I expect that legendary Lotus handling is going to live up, but I don't expect it'll be worth the risk that I take every time I get in this car or the tons of work that I've had to put in to get to this point. So then why do I still own it? To answer that, I want to talk about one more Lotus, the Emira. Now, the Emira is basically the grown-up version of the Europa. It's mid-engine, it's composite body, but it's got 400 horsepower, power steering, and you can wear shoes when you drive it. The Emira is a better car than the Europa, but it doesn't matter. When you do something that's as committed and as extreme as the Europa, it almost doesn't really matter how the result works out. To me, the Europa is best measured as a work of art, not as a car. And as a work of art, I think it's a perfect success. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to check out some of my other videos, and I'll catch you soon.